So my friends always say that if something unlucky is going to happen, then it will most likely happen to me. They always say that if there is a creeper around, then I will end up being the one creeped on. Both of these statements seem to be true. I've been stalked multiple times, some ending pretty badly, and I have the worst luck imaginable. This story happened 3 years ago, and I still have nightmares about it. My mother came to stay with me for a week, which I knew would be a nightmare. We can hardly stand to be in the same room as one another, so fighting is inevitable. On her 5th night here, we got into a heated debate about religion and somehow turned into a full-out screaming match. About an hour into the screaming, my apartment manager knocked on the door. Before I could even apologize, my mother jumps in and says that I had been threatening her. I was so shocked and appalled that it threw me into a mini panic attack. I grabbed my keys from the key rack by the door and took off. It wasn't the wisest thing to do, but I was so frazzled that I didn't know what else to do. I ended up sobbing my eyes out just driving. This went on and off for about an hour and 70 miles. Driving has always calmed me down, so even after the tears subsided, I kept going. About another hour later, I saw an exit for a dam, which surprised me. I lived here for 2 years, and I had no idea there was a dam anywhere close by. I decided to go take a look, even though it was 3 a.m. and pitch black. I still wasn't ready to head back, and this seemed like a good distraction. It was another 30 miles on a desolate road before I finally reached the dam. It was hard to miss because it was the only light I had seen for those 30 miles. I crossed the dam and saw that there were a couple of turns leading to campsites. At this point, I also realized that there was a legit lake. Yeah, I know, dam equals lake, but I didn't really put the two together. I decided to flip around and go back to a little parking area I had seen near the dam. Once there, I parked and my night took a turn for the terrifying. I parked and proceeded to make one idiotic move after another. I rolled down one of my windows and could hear the sound of water hitting ashore, but in the light of my headlights, I couldn't see where it was coming from. The mosquitoes were pretty bad, so I rolled my window back up and started fishing around in my back seat for a flashlight that I knew I had somewhere in the car. Then I remembered that I had it in my trunk. Now, for what happens next, please feel free to label me as an idiot, because I surely am. I popped the trunk, turned off my car, opened the door, stepped out, closed the door, got the flashlight, closed the trunk, went back to the door, and it was locked. My doors unlock when you open them, so I have no idea how the door became locked again, but it was, and like the moron that I am, I still had the key in the ignition. I knew the door should have remained unlocked, so I hadn't really thought about taking the key. Instantly, tears started to well up because I knew I hadn't even bothered taking my phone with me. I panicked for a little while, but then I remembered the campsites I had seen, and I hoped that maybe someone would be in one and that they would have a phone I could borrow. I started walking and fretting about waking up some poor stranger in the middle of the night, but I didn't see any other options. Each campsite I came to was completely empty. I think I checked like 15 or so before I started to get really nervous about how far I was wandering from my car. I think I had to have walked about a mile or so, and on the walk back, my battery started to fade on the flashlight. I was only about halfway back, I'd say, and my panic reached a whole new level. For whatever reason, the parking area in my car seemed like a safe haven, and I started sprinting. Remember what I said about being a moron with bad luck? Yeah. In my panic and in the darkness, I got switched around somewhere and ended up in a dead-end campsite, even though I would have sworn that I was still on the main road. This is when the major tears started. I panicked even more and ended up yet in another campsite. It felt like I was just getting more and more lost, and I couldn't hear the water anymore, so I calmed myself and decided to stay put till morning, which I knew wasn't too far away. I sat down, wrapped my arms around my legs, and proceeded to try rocking myself into calmness. It worked pretty well until I saw him. I had my eyes closed as I rocked, but then I heard a dull footstep. Looked up, obviously startled, and saw him standing only a few feet away. He was massive to me, and had a large but not fat build, like a football player. In hindsight, it's amazing that I hadn't heard him approaching sooner. For a second, all I could do was stare in the horror I was feeling and gasp out incomprehensible words. Then I literally screamed. It only took him a second to cross the distance between us, but I didn't even have the time to properly get up before he had his hand around my throat, choking me. For reference, I'm 5'3" and 132 pounds. Not skinny, but not fat. To him, I was nothing more than a rag doll. I wasn't even sure what was happening, but I was being jerked around by the neck and arm. His hands were huge, and every place he grasped and pulled felt like he would snap something. When the movement stopped, I was in his lap with my head pressed against his chest and one of his legs partially crossed over me. He was half cradling me, half grappling me. I was too dazed to make a sound, but when I tried, his hand would tighten over my throat again. I went still for a few moments, but then I felt his tongue against my throat. He smelled like rancid beer and something decomposing. I struggled to get free again, but this time he pinched my esophagus between his thumb and forefinger. It was light at first, but then he started increasing the pressure. By the time he was done, I felt like I was going to pass out. I don't want to go into too much detail because the memory is still hard to revisit, but he went back to licking, groping, and kissing. It was traumatizing, but he never went for anything too intimate. I gave up on trying to scream or get away, but he would still occasionally choke me. I sat there and simply sobbed. Then, possibly even more disturbing, he started to hum and rock me. I'm not sure why this part bothered me so much, but it did. His voice seemed higher than it should be, and his hum was rather nasal. I don't know how to describe that. Then, just as his humming was becoming almost frantic sounding, I saw headlights and he stopped. Somewhere in the distance, it looked as if a car was heading our way. He also saw it, and I felt panic well up inside me, worried that he would drag me off somewhere, but he didn't. He simply let me go, stood up, and walked the opposite way into the trees. Without him supporting me, I fell back slightly and watched him walk off. The sun wasn't fully up yet, but there was enough light to make out more of him than I had been able to before. He looked as bad as he smelled. Dirty, saggy jeans, a white hoodie that was so stained that it looked brownish gray, and medium-length brown matted hair. I didn't see his face at all because I kept my eyes shut for the entire time that he had me. I could hear the car getting closer, and I stood up. About 30 feet away was my flashlight and where I had been sitting, and I realized how far he had taken me while he pulled me around like a doll. I could see the car lights through the trees, but then they suddenly took a left and panic set in again. I worried that he would come back if he saw that the car wasn't coming to this campsite. I started to run. I didn't even care about staying on a path or road, just as long as I could still see the car. I caught myself on a few bushes and scraped myself, falling a few times, but the pain didn't even register. I was too desperate to care. It felt like forever, and I don't know how long I actually ran, but I eventually ended up being close enough to the car that the couple inside noticed me. They stopped and the guy got out. I remember not even being able to talk. For a long while, I was just shrieking at the poor guy. Even before I could tell him what happened, his girlfriend had called the police. Everything after that seems like a blur now. The couple drove me to the parking area as told to do so by the cops, just in case the man was still around. The sheriff's department showed up, took my statement, took me to the nearest station, asked for another statement, checked me for evidence, called my mother, and contacted the fire department to break into my car for me. Just as my mom and friend arrived at the station, a sheriff's car pulled up, and in the back seat was the man. I was promptly pulled back inside and asked to make a positive identification. Wasn't like in the movies though. They literally just brought him up to me and asked, "This him?" Now this part still leaves me extremely emotionally confused, but it is what it is. As I looked up at him, he wouldn't meet my eyes. He looked ashamed, confused, and oddly vulnerable. And then his eyes started to tear up. I knew that something had to be wrong with him mentally, and in a weird way I actually felt some sympathy for him. I did confirm that it was him, but afterwards, I actually worried enough about him that I asked what would happen to him. This is where sympathy flew out the window. He was indeed mentally unstable, as I found out, but he was also a convicted sex offender already. Yeah, I actually lucked out with what little had happened to me. Looking back, it seems more like a dream, or nightmare. My mother and friend took me back to my car, and rather than being stuck in a car with my mom, I opted to let her drive my car back and I rode with my friend. The entire drive back, she kept drilling me for more information, but I couldn't bring myself to even talk about it. I still don't like talking about it, and I refuse to ever go camping again. I'm also extremely paranoid about always having my key on me when I step out of my car. Not a funny haha kind of paranoid, but literally is now a compulsion to check to make sure I have my key with me. I usually have to check like 3 times to satisfy myself. And oh yeah, as far as the guy goes, he was admitted into a psych hospital, and I really hope he remains there. It was last summer, July of 2017, when I decided to take my toddler to the park. It's about 2 miles from my house and on the other end of town. Thinking about it now, the park is an awful location. Secluded on a back road in the middle of nowhere. But at the time, I thought it would be a great place to allow my daring 2-year-old to roam without having to worry about traffic. I was 5 months pregnant at the time also and figured that I could use the exercise, so I loaded her up in the stroller and walked over. My daughter was and is still a huge fan of the whole rock hunting trend. So upon our arrival, I took her out of the stroller, parked it under the pavilion, and Hand in hand, we went along the creek and through the park scavenging for painted rocks. I noticed a glittery rock under the bottom of the slide, and pointed it out to my daughter. She ran and scooped it up, yelling and screaming, "I found one! I found one!" Next, I heard clapping. It was then I first noticed a man sitting down at a picnic bench near the pavilion eating a sandwich. He had a smile on his face, which initially seemed friendly, and he was clapping at my daughter's excitement and even let out a woohoo. He looked to be around my age at the time. I'd guessed 23. I later found out probably early 30s. He was wearing sweatpants and a plain black tank, a beanie on his head, basketball sneakers, and a book bag. Me being from a small town where everyone is just genuinely friendly, I thought that maybe he had just walked over from the basketball courts down the street and just wanted some shade to eat his lunch. My little one was so persistent on finding more rocks that I didn't even have time to think, before she took my hand and led me over to a small bank down to the duck pond. I didn't realize at the time that my phone, my pepper spray, and everything I had with me was now in a stroller, under a pavilion with a total stranger, and my daughter and I were out of sight. After a few minutes of searching the rim of the pond for rocks, we decided it was time to go play on the playground. As we crossed over the top of the bank, I saw this man rummaging through my stroller. I reached into my pocket for my phone so that I could call the town cops, thinking that this was just some thug looking for some spare cash, or maybe a purse in my child's stroller. Then I realized my phone is in the stroller. I'm 2 miles from my house. The park is completely surrounded by creeks and ponds, with the entryway being the only way in, and the nearest house is about a half mile past the pavilion. So even if I wanted to run or go get help, this guy would obviously see me and flee. Now let me remind you, at this moment I was thinking the worst. I didn't think about this guy being a potential killer or anything. My main concern was that he was going to steal my belongings. Naive, I know. So after a couple of minutes of standing there, watching him go through the stroller, he looks up. Our eyes lock. I say, "Excuse me." He replies, "I'm sorry. Do you happen to have any aspirin? I'm not feeling well." I nodded my head no, grabbed the stroller in one hand and my daughter's hand in the other. In hindsight, I should have at this point put my toddler in her stroller, but I didn't because I knew that I just wanted out of there as quickly as possible. This is when things got really weird. "Well, do you have any water or maybe a bite to eat? I think my sugar is low." I heard him say in an innocent tone. My mind started going a million miles a minute. I literally just watched him eat a sandwich. This was a trap. "Well, aren't you the cutest little thing I've ever seen? What does your shirt say?" He says to my toddler as he lunges out and grabs her shoulder. I grip her hand tight and pull her towards me. "You've got to be kidding me," he read. "Oh, how cute. Do you like kittens? I have a couple at my house just down the road." I swooped her up, grabbed the stroller, and started walking as fast as I could with a giant baby belly and a squirmy toddler in my arms. "Oh, I wasn't trying to scare you," I hear him yell. I keep walking. I get to the entrance of the park, turn around, and he's following me, hot on my trail. He's smiling. His smile now doesn't seem so innocent and kind, more like malicious and twisted. He's waving at me, trying to flag me down. I know that at this rate, due to my pregnancy and my toddler kicking and screaming, he would eventually catch up to me. So I stop, strap my daughter in her stroller, missing 2 buckles, and take off. I'm now trying to figure out how to get to my phone. I know that it is in my purse, in the bottom of the stroller, but I can't reach it without stopping and digging it out. Every couple of feet, I would look back to see if this creep was still behind me. Every single time he was. Until I hit town. I assume that the increase in traffic scared him off. At this point, I call 911, who puts me through to the state police barracks. I tell them what happened. They took a report and asked if he was still following me. I said, "Not that I know of." They said that since I was now within a half mile from my home, they would just send a trooper to my house whenever they got a chance to finish the report and get a description. No cop ever came. The next day I called at 8 a.m. demanding an officer come out. Once again, I was told they would when they got a chance. So I took to the almighty Facebook with my story. Not so much for attention, more to let other parents know to be aware when taking their kids to that park. That night at 9 p.m., the local news shared my story over Facebook. At 9:10 p.m., my phone rang. It was a local police officer asking me to remove my Facebook post because it was causing an uproar in the community. I went off. The man harassed me and my toddler, tried talking my toddler into going to his home, and followed me into town, and they couldn't care less. Fast forward 2 weeks, I was looking at the local news page and came across my story. I see that someone responded to it with the haha emoji reaction. I click to see who it was, and I see that his name is, let's just say, Tim Smith. I start looking through his photos, trying to put a face to the name, and then I see it. A photo of Tim Smith with the creep from the park. The caption saying, "My son and me," and all the comments asking if he was out of jail yet. I mentioned this to my husband, and he had the brilliant idea to look up the last name Smith on Megan's Law to see if anything would show up. Sure enough, there he was. He did 8 years in jail for molesting a 4-year-old and had a couple of other charges on his record too. I called the police and reported that I now know the name of the person and know for a fact that he's a child predator and shouldn't have been that close to a park or school to begin with. There is a daycare about a mile away which we walked past while he was following me. Again, they dismissed me. Just last month, I made a public Facebook post on the local rock hunting page about how excited I am to start rock hunting again now that the snow has melted. A bunch of people liked the post, but only one person commented. Someone by the name of Ron Smith, who wrote, "I can't wait to see you again." This happened to me 2 years ago. It was my first month on the job and I worked night security at this pretty interesting place. For the record, I still work there and have more strange stories possibly to tell in the future. I'm a 38-year-old male. I've worked security jobs most of my life in the graveyard shift. I was an event security guard for various well-known concert venues for years, so I've seen my fair share of strange things and crazy people. In other words, I don't scare easily and hardly ever go into panic mode when a crisis comes up. The place I currently work at is a resort-style apartment complex. To get the layout, there are 3 floors of apartments with 50 units on each one. This place takes up one city block with a golf course in the back, indoor swimming pools, hot tubs, and a small movie theater. You name it, this place has it. Most of the residents are retired doctors, lawyers, and otherwise rich. There are some younger people that live here as well, stockbrokers and real estate agents and so on. Some just use their apartment in the summer and leave as soon as the snow falls. It is located in a well-known tourist town in the United States. The building itself has 12 exits on the first floor. The doors are locked at 11 p.m. You can exit, but you can't get back in unless you go to the front of the building and ask to be buzzed in or pick up the call box phone next to whatever exit you are at. It will ring the company's cell phone and I will answer and come let you in. The front lobby is set up much like a hotel, with sliding glass doors, which I lock when I start my shift. In the middle of the building on the first floor are the 2 big slider doors, which I also lock. They lead to the private parking lot. The parking lot itself is gated and you need a code to get in it. This was midsummer and while it's never really hot here, tonight was an exception. It was still very warm after the sun had set. I came in at 10:50 to start my shift. We have a routine to hand off the keys, event log, and phone to the next person on duty. Despite its size, I am the only security person here at night. My coworker, who was leaving, told me the side iron gates that lead to the parking lot are open on one side because they are stuck. This is nothing new, and they often do get jammed. She told me the repair people would be here in the morning sometime to fix them, but to just do some extra patrol out there tonight. This place sits across the road from a public park, and while the area is pretty decent, the park tends to breed druggies and homeless at night who sometimes like to try and wander on the property or cause trouble. My night started out as uneventful. As security guards in this place, we only have pepper spray, a large flashlight, keys, and a company cell phone to call 911 if need be. We are told to not confront them with bodily harm. Nor can we detain anyone, really. We are simply eyes and ears to call the police if something comes up. Of course, you can defend yourself if you need to, but in all cases, if you are in danger, calling the police is company policy. Basically, I am to walk the grounds and floors for anyone suspicious and watch cameras in the security office, which is in the lobby, and otherwise try to stay alert. If a resident calls for a maintenance request, I would take the information down into the computer for day shift, or if a resident called with a security issue, I would attend to it. Pretty easy enough job, I thought. I locked the doors to the parking lot and the lobby doors. I did a sweep of all the floors and then found myself at the desk. It was really quiet and it rolled around to 3 a.m. I had just sat down to eat my lunch when the company's cell phone rang. The caller ID let me know it was from one of our outside call box phones. I picked it up and said, "Thanks for calling. Insert resort name here. This is Security Officer James. How can I help you?" All I heard was someone breathing heavily. I glanced at the cameras and could see the shadow of a figure standing just out of reach from the door in camera view. All I could see was the open call box and the metal cord from the phone. I again asked, "How can I help?" The man started to breathe heavier and then laughed. Then silence. It was one of those laughs you hear in a movie when the lunatic is about to do something terrible. I got up from my chair and started to walk out of the office and to the door he was at when it rang again, this time from call box number 2, which was further down. I quickly looked at the camera and saw this large figure in a hooded jacket. I knew this was strange, as it was very warm outside. He was holding a black bag in his hands, but he had his back to the camera. "I'm coming for you, and you're going to die," this voice said in a raspy, deep tone. He hung up before I had the chance to say anything. Then the phone rang again, this time when I picked up, and before he could speak, I let him know the cops were on their way and to leave the property now as he is on camera. He tried the doors and both were locked. This time he was at yet another call box. This guy had to be running at top speed to make it to the next and the next call box, as they are a good distance between doors on the outside. "I can see you. Are you ready to die?" "The cops won't make it here in time," the guy said. I spoke loudly and pretended like I was talking to another security officer and asked him to send 3 other security guards to such and such location, and that police are dispatched. The guy slammed the phone down loudly against the callbox receiver, and I watched him on camera take off into the darkness to the park area. I figured it scared him off. I was going to call the police, but honestly, the location of this place, it would take them at least 15 minutes to get here, and I figured this guy was just some tweaker from the park. I scanned the cameras and walked the back lot, just to be sure nobody was there. I had my pepper spray in my hands just in case, but no one was out there. I returned to my desk and wrote what happened in the incident log. About a half hour passed. I had finished lunch and was just about to do rounds when the phone rang again. This time it was from an unknown number. I thought it'd be a resident calling for a repair issue or something. I picked up and said my normal line. "Where are the cops?" "I don't see them, but I see you," the voice said. Shit. It was that guy again. I scanned the cameras and did not see anything. I went to the front door to look out, and there was nothing but darkness and a few front floodlights on. "I know you're alone and you're going to die soon," he said. I basically told him to get screwed and hang up. I called the non-emergency number for 911 and let them know what was going on. The dispatcher said that she would send out a car to check the area and make contact with me. Next thing I hear is a loud thud against the glass windows to the day manager office, which sits across from the security room. Another 3 loud bangs. I run to the door and unlock it, pull up the shades and shine my flashlight through the window into the darkness. I catch the face of this hooded man. He looked to be about 40 with long stringy hair, poking down, and these wild eyes. He looked right at me and grinned before slamming his head into the window to try to break it. I started yelling at him and told him the cops were coming in to get the heck out of here. That's when he pulled out the biggest dang butcher knife I've ever seen and made a slicing motion, like he would use it to cut my throat. This guy was obviously crazy and probably on drugs. He continued slamming his body against the glass, trying to break it. He used his head to try and break the window, but managed to bust his head open, so the window now had blood all over it. I backed out of the office and locked the door to it. I then decided to wait for the cops, as this guy was out of control and my pepper spray wasn't going to stop him, and the last thing I wanted was to handle a bloody crazy person. He then ran to the nearest side door and took the callbox phone off the hook. Then ran to each callbox and removed all the phones, which caused my company's cell phone to ring and jam up the line. This guy had to be on meth or something because he ran as fast as I could imagine. I watched the camera and noticed to my horror, the sliding door to the garage was open. Now, it was common for residents to go out to their cars and unlock the door themselves. It's just a sliding lock like kind in department stores, but this is the last thing I need with this nut job running around. I sprinted across the building and took a shortcut through a couple of banquet rooms to make it to the garage. As I was doing so, I saw that crazy guy running up the garage pathway. I slid that door as fast as I could and locked it before he got to the entryway. He then slammed his body into the glass, over and over, but the door did not move. I locked the second set of doors in case he got through the outside ones. He would at least be trapped or slowed down. I reached for my pepper spray, thinking maybe he would just leave, and yelled, "The cops are here." He started to laugh and howl and then held that knife up again, before running into the darkness of the parking garages. I called the cops on my personal cell phone to let them know that the man has a knife. The dispatcher told me the cops would be there shortly, and I let her know what happened. I made my way to the front again and locked myself in the security office. At least this place had no windows and I could watch on camera. I heard another loud thud and bang and realized that he was at the front lobby doors trying to get in. I was hoping the cops would roll up any minute, but they didn't, and while it probably didn't take them long, it felt like forever at this point. The guy was standing at the lobby doors with the knife in hand. He faced the camera, and by this time his hood had fallen back. He was bald-headed, with wild, long, stringy, crazy hair on the sides of his head. His eyes were huge, and I will never forget that grin on his face as he mouthed to the camera, "Die, die," while making stabbing motions with that knife. Blood running across his face from slamming into the glass. He then ran out into the darkness. About 5 minutes later, the cops showed up. They sent one officer. He asked me what the guy looked like, and I told him I have camera footage. He drove through the area first and shined a spotlight. The cop returned to tell me he couldn't find anyone, and he had driven around the entire block and back area behind the golf course. I showed him the footage and printed out a picture from the camera. The cop said he didn't see any sign of the guy and that he would patrol the area and to call back if he came again. It was now nearly 5 a.m. when the cop left. I waited until 6 a.m. when it was daylight and people were starting to get out and about, before I walked around and hung up all the phone boxes. This guy literally took all 12 phones off the hook. When my manager came in during the morning shift at 8 a.m., I told her what happened, and she said that they would keep an eye out and have a meeting to let everyone who worked here know and to be aware. They had an extra security guard on my shift for 2 weeks after, but the guy never returned. So my mom left the picture when I was 3. She literally picked up one day and just walked out. So for a long time, it was just my dad and me. I'm a male, and at the time, my dad just met Tammy. I was 13. I was chubby and at the time small for my age. I still had my baby fat. I was and still am a nerd. So was my dad, and we shared a lot of love for Star Wars, comic books, and science fiction. My dad decided he needed to meet someone. He was lonely, and I thought it would be nice to have a mother figure. This was before online dating and there were still personals in the paper. My dad filled out an ad, and it wasn't long before he met Tammy. I remember him telling me about her and how happy he looked. They dated for a month before my dad figured it was getting serious and wanted to introduce me to her. So my dad decided to take us out for dinner and then to move me. I remember my grandma helping me to get dressed, and I was super nervous to meet her. She seemed nice at first, but even at that age, I could sense that something was off to me. We went to Sizzler's for dinner, and my dad told me to order whatever I wanted. He then excused himself to the bathroom. I smiled at Tammy and went to say something, and she cut me off immediately, telling me my dad's been letting me eat whatever I wanted and that I'm a fat little pig. She demonstrated this by actually making pig noises. I was crushed. I mean, honestly, I wasn't very heavy. Maybe a little chubby, but not obese like some children are today. My dad actually didn't let me eat whatever I wanted, but anyways, back to the story. She ignored me until my dad came back and then played nice. I, for my dad's sake, faked being nice to her. I wanted to tell my dad what she said, but I didn't want to disappoint him or upset him. My dad was and is my best friend, so I hoped and prayed for my dad that he would realize what a bitch she was and come to his senses, but sadly, he didn't. They dated steadily, and when I was 15, Tammy moved in. Now that summer, I finally lost my baby fat, and I grew like a good foot or two. My dad's 6'3", so it wasn't surprising that I shot up almost 6 feet by age 15. Puberty kicked in as well, and my voice was doing that weird crackling thing. I made it a point to avoid Tammy. I went to school, came home, stayed in my room, did homework, and waited for my dad to get home. However, she started in on me most days as soon as I walked in. She'd always find something. I was a loser, stupid, etc. Just cruel, mean things. The few times I told my dad, he just insisted we all needed to adjust. So I just decided I could put up with her for 3 more years for my dad's sake, and then I was out of there. The next 3 years sucked. Her insults got meaner. She would also do things like put glass, pieces of paper, and sand in my food. And just like my plate, I started refusing to eat her food. I was terrified she'd poison me. It was around this time my dad and she got married. Graduation came and I was so relieved. I was set to enlist in the army. I planned on being in basic by July, but of course she had to try to ruin that. My recruiter got a call from someone saying I smoked pot and did drugs. Thankfully, I passed my drug test, but I know it was her. One night before I left for boot camp, my dad had a huge party for me. She had tried to cancel it earlier, claiming she was sick, but by that point my dad had already invited most of my family and friends and wasn't going to cancel. She pouted the entire time. I started to see that my dad was kind of starting to see past her facade. Let's skip a few more years and I get leave. I've been deployed twice now, and I hadn't seen my dad in like 22 months, so I was dying to see him. He had told me in previous conversations that their marriage was pretty much over. She was not only controlling and verbally abusive, but a few weeks prior, she had knocked my dad out with a cast iron skillet. He had given her an ultimatum of a month to get out, or he was throwing her crap out. The night I got in was late. My dad picked me up and we came home. She was gone. Supposedly, she had started moving her crap into her sister's and was pretty much staying most nights there. So Dad and I eat and we get to bed. Around 1, I feel my bed move. I'm exhausted and figure it's my dad's dog, Caesar, a German Shepherd. That's when I feel hands around my neck, and I guess my soldier instincts kick in. I flip the intruder over and subdue them, and my dad runs in and flips the light on. He's got his gun out. Surprise, surprise, it's my stepmother. Dad calls the police, files a restraining order, and serves her with divorce papers. A lot more crazy stuff happens, such as her destroying my dad's new Mercedes, but I won't even bore you with those details. What matters is that they are divorced now and I never have to see that crazy woman again. I know there are some girls or guys like me who think they're not attractive enough to be targeted by sexual predators. I'm here to tell you that you are wrong. For reference, I'm quite overweight and generally don't attract positive attention about my appearance. Never had a problem finding a partner despite my size, but no one is ever interested in me purely for my looks. I do get the "you have a pretty face" for a fat girl spiel, but that's hardly the same. Because of this, I've never been creeped on or felt threatened. I take walks at 2 a.m. in bad neighborhoods, leave my drinks unattended at bars, and never suspect anyone who might give off a weird vibe of being a creeper. My worst case scenario was being robbed, but I usually never carried cards or large amounts of cash on me. I felt weirdly invincible, as if nobody would bother to hassle the big girl walking down the street. My boyfriend and I took a trip to Oklahoma City Zoo last month and had a blast learning about all the animals. Nearing the end of our zoo visit, it was close to closing time and it had begun to rain just a little. We were at the back of the zoo on the Ozark Trail exhibit, which is a half-mile long trail that winds through and over natural Oklahoman habitats, such as forests, plains, swamps, and even man-made structures like barns and sheds. We were kind of rushing through because it was getting late, and even though it was drizzling, it was hot and humid and taking its toll on us. Besides a couple of other stragglers, the huge exhibit was mostly empty. We approached the halfway point, a part of the trail that led into a barn to showcase nocturnal local fauna, and my boyfriend said he was about to pee himself and couldn't hold it anymore. There were benches in this area, so I said I'd wait while he backtracked to find a bathroom. He ran off, and I figured I'd check out the barn while I waited, assuming it might be cooler in there. But the barn was dark. It housed owls, raccoons, a huge bat tank in the middle, and some various other animals along the shelves. The only light source was a dim black light in the bat tank and some low heat lamps for the owls and some lizards. It was also extremely humid and stuffy, so I passed over the animal shelves quickly and stopped for a second to admire the bats. It was a floor-to-ceiling glass tank, and it was kind of hard to see, so I cupped my hand around my eyes and kind of leaned into it. As I was doing this, I felt someone press into me from behind and squish me against the tank. I thought it was my boyfriend at first, but I smelled really strong BO and knew it wasn't him. He wears deodorant and definitely put it on this day. I thought it was some kind of joke and waited for the person to leave, or like maybe they were just being pushy, trying to see the bats better. I felt him breathing hard and he kept pushing harder and harder against me. I was panicking but in denial at the same time, like, why would this guy be doing this? I tried getting away from him but he wouldn't budge. I could feel his hands groping my sides and hips, and I was actually embarrassed that he was grabbing and pinching the roll of fat above the waist of my pants. I remember how awful he smelled and how loud his breathing was, even though the bats were squeaking and making a ton of noise. My cell phone in my back pocket vibrated really loudly and he jumped, and when it started ringing, he finally let go and took off. I didn't see which exit he left out of or even what he looked like because I was too stunned to turn away from the bats. I felt shocked and humiliated and scared and sexually violated for the first time in my life. I wanted to leave the barn, but I was scared that if I moved, he'd come back. I wasn't even sure if he was still in there or not. My phone rang again, and I saw it was my boyfriend who was calling. I answered it, and he said he couldn't find me. Told him where I was, and he walked in a couple seconds later. With my boyfriend there, I felt safe again, and saw that the guy was nowhere in the barn. I'm sure he was long gone. I wanted to ask my boyfriend if he'd seen anyone leave the barn, but I knew I'd have to explain it to him, and the idea made me feel physically ill. I thought about telling zoo staff before we left, but again, I'd have to relive the story, and I didn't think they'd be able to do much with my description. It didn't occur to me at the time that they might have had cameras in the barn. I did eventually speak over the phone with park security a couple of days after, and leave an anonymous tip about the barn. They wanted me to make a report with the police, but I declined. I feel better about it now and thought I'd say something to you all. I haven't told my boyfriend or anyone but the zoo security, and I don't think I will anytime soon. It's a lot easier to talk about when it's anonymous. Even though there was no chance of me anticipating an attack in a barn exhibit at the zoo, many insecure young people might feel invincible, like I did when it comes to attacks. So please always be vigilant and careful, especially when you're in a dangerous situation, because there's no telling whether or not you'll be a target, no matter what you look like. A couple of years ago, I found myself in a very disturbing situation. I was getting off work at my student internship in Charlotte, North Carolina, and it had been snowing all day. Now, for all of you guys who live in the South, you know it's a big deal when it even calls for snow and grocery stores are raided the nights before. I had decided to go and get some groceries to enjoy with my girlfriend, now wife, since the mayhem had ended and only people like me who had trucks or all-terrain vehicles could get around. I went into Walmart, got the groceries I needed, and started my way back to my truck. It had started to snow harder, and there was already 5 to 7 inches on the ground, and it was around 12 in the afternoon. I was daydreaming about sledding and watching movies the next couple of days with my girlfriend. Just then, as I almost reached my truck, I was jolted by the act of someone grabbing my arm. As I turned around, I saw an older lady who was maybe 5 feet 6 inches. She asked me if I had cigarettes. Now, I don't even smoke, so I told her no, I did not, and I turned back to my truck. Again, she gently tugged on my arm and then told me that she had just got here from Alabama on a bus with her granddaughters and dog. She was here for breast cancer treatment and wanted money for a hotel. Again, I honestly told her I had no money on me, which I purposely do because I don't like donating to people's drug habits and would rather get people food myself if that's what they really need. At this point, she said, "Do you know the area well?" Wanting to get out of this situation, I said no, I did not, which was kind of a lie, thinking she'd now leave me alone. Then she asked, "Oh, okay, well, since the weather is bad, will you drive me to my hotel so I can meet up with my granddaughter and her dog, who are in the hotel lobby waiting? It's right up the road. I can show you." I am a Christian and was always taught to help people out. So even though everything at this moment told me to deny this woman again, I told her sure, since I was raised on the rule, never judge a book by its cover. Plus, being a male of 6 feet, I figured I could take her if things got dicey. So she jumped in my truck against all odds, and the next thing I know, she's smoking a cigarette in my truck, and I told her politely to please put it out. Being nervous, I missed my first red flag when she asked me for a cigarette, since she obviously had some. She obliged and threw the cigarette out the window to my dismay. So we started driving up the road towards her hotel, at which I was on high alert now. At the moment of going through worst case scenarios in my head, I noticed her fumbling through her purse, searching for something and looking out the corner of her eye at me. I told her, "Just so you know, I have a gun in my truck, so don't try anything crazy." No, I did have a gun, but it was a shotgun that I had neglected to get out of my back seat a couple of days earlier, and in reality, this would do me no good if she pulled a gun on me at that moment. At this, she stopped messing around in her purse and pulled out her cell phone from her pocket. She looked at me and said, "Actually, do you mind taking a detour? I need to pick up some money from some friends." Okay, at this point in time, red flags were firing off, but again, never judging a book by its cover kept running through my mind. So I told her that was fine, but we had to make it quick because I needed to make it home. At that moment, she dialed someone on the phone and said, "Yeah, this guy is coming over to bring me to get the stuff. You are ready, right?" At that point, I asked her to talk to the person. When I answered the phone, a man who sounded like he's been chain smoking since birth said, "Hello." I started asking him questions like, "What's your name?" and asked him if indeed he knew of any hotels nearby. He seemed to stumble over his words and then said he had to go. At this point, I should have gotten a clue and kicked her out of my car, especially after watching so many horror movies. This is when the person goes against their gut and pays for it. But for fear of her actually telling the truth and me feeling like a terrible person, I decided to go on. At this point, we turned down the street and I saw a cop car sitting there off the side. I wanted to go drop her off with the cop, but I would feel terrible if she was actually telling the truth, so I passed the cop, who at this point, with a weird eerie smile on her face, said, "Glad he's there. Now I feel safe." Now as we entered the apartment complex, I saw how run down it was. It looked to be a place where heavy drug traffic was going down. Just a very unsettling place, even during the snow. As I parked outside the place she said was her friend's, she said, "Okay, I'll go get the guy and be back." At this, I was very unsettled by everything. Things just didn't seem right. She saw my facial expression of wanting to just get the heck out of Dodge, and to this, she sneered at me, saying something along the lines of me being a terrible person if I left her there in this weather under her condition. At this, I got mad. After all, I went out of my way to help her. As I waited, I started to think about things that could happen. What if she brought back a gun or worse? That moment, I saw 3 guys coming towards my truck. I realized things were not right. She had set me up to rob me or something because these guys were big, and one of them had something behind his back, which I couldn't see. That moment, I put it in reverse and took off, being super thankful for 4-wheel drive. I looked back at them chasing me and saw that what was hidden behind the one guy's back was a crowbar. I don't know what would have happened to me, but now looking back, I see how dumb and blind I was. There was no hotel anywhere close to the area I was in. The nearest hotel or motel was 20 minutes away. Had I waited for the guys to get to my truck, they probably would have beaten me and robbed me, or worse. I thank God every day that I escaped and was able to get married until this event. After that, I have never been to that Walmart ever again, or the area for that matter. A couple of months later, I told a coworker this story, and he told me that a year ago the same lady tried the same thing on him, but he declined altogether. Smart move on his part. This story happened when I was like 12. I'm now 25. The story I'm about to tell you might not be scary to most, but for me and my parents it was. I remember it was a Saturday night around 9 or 10 p.m. during summertime. I owned one dog at the time. His name was Benny. My parents decided that night that they felt like going for a walk around the block, walking Benny, and asked me whether I wanted to join them. I said no because I wanted to play my game on my PC, Perfect World International. My parents were okay with that, and with leaving me alone since the walk wouldn't take longer than 30 minutes tops. As my parents would get dressed to leave the house, I logged into the game and looked around at my guild and global chat to see if anyone was on. For some reason, nobody was, so I decided to join my parents. I got dressed, I put Benny on his leash, and we all leave. I'd like to mention that I lived in an apartment building that had like 10 floors, and we lived on the very first one. Not sure how to explain, but you have the basement of the building and then the first row of apartments. Basically, you enter the building and are already facing the apartments. I lived in the very first one. I remember always hating that because whoever would pass by our door, we would hear them at any time of the day or night. Whoever was lurking at night, we would hear them. It was somewhat eerie to live on floor 0. Anyway, we leave the house and my dad closes the door. We had 3 keyholes and a steel bar that would block the door from the inside. The bar covered half of the door. Precautions were my father's obsession. We exit the building and enjoy our walk. After 15 minutes, we realize that the wind has changed from warm summer wind to incoming storm wind. My mom makes the call to go back home as Benny already did all of his duties, so we all return. We open the building door, climb the 5 stairs to our door, and attempt to open it, and my father does the following. Unlocks the first 3 locks and then attempts to unlock the metal bar that holds the door locked. At that moment, my father pauses, turns around at us with the most serious face I've ever seen on him, and whispers to us to call the police and ring the neighbor's door. My mom goes to the second apartment, and the neighbor, who I will call Ted, comes out asking my father what happened. My dad whispered to him, covering the see-through hole of the door. Someone is in our house. He or they are holding the door. Please stay here with my family and attempt to open it. I'll be back. After saying that, I see my father rush, all by himself around the building in the dark. I say dark because we didn't have a street light on the side of our apartment, facing the block garden. My dad disappears into the darkness. I go outside too, not following him too much, but only to hear if he's in trouble. He's my dad, don't judge me. As soon as I get out, I hear him shout, "Hey you, come back. Who the heck do you think you are? I already called the police." At the same time I hear him shout, I look at Ted, who manages to open the door and enter the house. I go after them and enter my house. It no longer felt like my house. In just 15 minutes, while we were talking, the home invaders made a complete mess of our house. All of our shelves and wardrobes were pulled out. Our clothes were scattered all over the house. Benny's dry food was all over the floor, indicating they must have tripped in his bowls, probably not knowing we owned a dog. But what scared me the most was how organized they were. I say they because after seeing the disaster that was left behind, we knew it was impossible for just one person to hold the door and steal and organize what they would want to take with them. I say organized because the thieves put in our living room. all packed and ready, what they wanted but couldn't steal. On the couch, they placed our laptops, one of our TVs, my father's collections of coins, our phones, chargers, wallets, and even my father's camera. He's a photographer, and that week he had to attend a wedding. They didn't have enough time to steal all of that, so they just settled with some of my mom's jewelry and some pocket money. After seeing this, in my silly child mind, I rushed to my room to check my piggy bank. I always saved up money from whatever chores I did. It wasn't much, but it was my work and savings, and at the time, I thought they stole it too. When I entered my room, I see the metal bars covering my windows are cut open and my window broken. This is how they entered, through my room. My room is the only room facing the side of the building and the one most secluded from views, so to speak. Needless to say, I never felt safe in my own room, and which I had to live in for the next 10 years of my life, until I moved in with my fiance. The police arrive. They start throwing white dust. I have no idea what that is still, all over our house to find fingerprints. They take pictures, take our statements, and analyze my room and window. They were unable to catch the home invaders, but were able to tell us that this invasion was not the only one in our neighborhood. During that month, another 4 houses were broken into, one of them being the home of a cop, not related to the cops at our home. They told us that the invaders analyzed their victims, learned their schedule, and even knew where the children's rooms were, as they seemed to be entering the houses through the children's windows. All the families affected by them had children. They did not expect us to be back that soon and panicked, hence one of them was holding the door with his body so that the others could flee. The person after whom my dad was shouting was probably the one holding the door and escaping last through the broken window. I don't know what could have happened if I didn't change my mind to give up on raiding for gears in my game. I would have probably come face to face with these invaders, and I'm happy I didn't. I recently received a friend request that reminded me of the story, so I'm going to share it here. This happened after I went to university, so I was like 18. I made an effort to make friends after I moved onto campus and ended up with a few groups to hang out with, including a new girlfriend and plenty of people from my classes that I liked well enough. There was one class before lunch where it was traditional for people to go to the cafeteria afterwards to eat in pairs of 3s. It wasn't very discerning about who I'd have lunch with because I got on fine with most people from class, and we were all trying to make an effort to be social. So when one girl, Lily, asked if I wanted to eat lunch together after that class, I didn't have any reason not to go. We talked about school and that kind of thing. Nothing noteworthy, but she did ask me to get lunch with her again the next week. It became a pattern, and there wasn't exactly a way of saying no suddenly. It was fine, but I did mean I lost the chance to eat with everyone else that I liked to on those days. In hindsight, I suppose that might have been the point. One day in class, I asked someone if I could add them on social media. This happened in front of Lily. I saw her face jerk towards me from a couple of seats over. It was such a sharp reaction that it was hard to ignore, and I still remember it. By the time I got home later that day, Lily had sent me a friend request. No friends in common. Don't know how she knew my last name. I was a bit surprised, but I guess she had just dug through the university social media pages and found me through there. It gave me a bad feeling, but surely it was fine, I thought. She ended up messaging me a lot and commenting on anything I posted. I told myself that she was just awkward and we became friends. If not kind of close. I'd known worse people. She still always got me to go eat lunch with her after our one shared class. Other than that, we rarely spent time together in person. I saw her around sometimes, but I never went out of my way to hang out with her, so it was mostly online messaging and seeing each other in group settings. Coincidentally, my girlfriend also called Lily. This was something that clearly bothered Lily. Not my girlfriend, who couldn't have found it less interesting. It's a common name. She occasionally hinted that she wanted my girlfriend to pick a different name or joked about her not suiting it. She clearly didn't like my girlfriend at all, and I had no idea why. But it was hard to ignore by this point. Lily was starting to unsubtly hint that she had a crush on me. I tried not to address it because what was I going to say? I've never known what to do when a friend makes a pass at me. I was also not interested in the least. Even ignoring the weird stuff she pulled, Lily was not my type at all. She tended to dress and act in a way somewhere between a 50s housewife and one of those adults who's still obsessed with Disney princesses. You can picture that. Things took an uncomfortable turn on the day of our last shared class for the year. Instead of asking me to lunch like she usually did, Lily asked if I'd go for a walk with her. Again, I didn't know exactly how to refuse, so I said alright. Our campus was bordered by a large patch of woodland. Lily led me into the woods, and The sounds of our fellow students slowly faded away. She sat me down on a log and I joined her. She started talking about how she was going to miss me over the summer. I tried placating her, but I didn't want to be there, especially because she seemed almost on the verge of tears. I think I tried to make an excuse about how having plans with my girlfriend, but before I could leave, Lily chose to kiss me without warning. It was uncomfortable to say the least. I got out of there and was happy to think I wouldn't see her for a while. I came back to university after the summer, moving into a house with my friends, without going off topic. There were some serious issues in my friend group, a lot of petty arguing and worse. I broke up with my girlfriend around the start of that school year as well, and basically the whole mess made me recontextualize things with Lily because it suddenly didn't seem as bad. That said, I didn't want to be alone with her. We mostly talked online. She was still constantly messaging me after all. One upside of everything was that I started dating a boy. Lily was not pleased to hear that news. I think she hoped to sneak in after I broke up with my girlfriend, but as I said before, that was never going to happen. There wasn't a big gap between my breakup and this new relationship, so she must have thought she missed her chance to be with me. This is where the story gets bad. At this time, I was fairly active on Tumblr. I occasionally talked about my life and mostly reblogged photos and stuff. I was on there one day when something odd happened. One of the blogs I followed had received an ask with some phrases I recognized. It took a second to register that it was taken from my About page. That made me freeze. I read the message properly. Somebody was asking this completely random person to analyze a section of text from my page, asking for their opinion on the type of person who would write it. I cannot stress how messed up it was to see people talking about me like I was a character in a book they were trying to study. The reply was basically, "I don't know, sorry." But the important thing was that the question hadn't been anonymous. It was linked to someone's blog. Obviously, I wanted to know who had taken such a bizarre interest in me. As far as I knew, no one in real life other than my boyfriend knew about my page. Well, no prizes for guessing who was behind it. What I found was like a shrine. She was using a fake name, but I recognized Lily all over that thing. It was this cutesy pink and red page. There were a few posts about her interests, but most of the content was focused on her primary interests. Me. Most of the posts were about me. There were accounts of things I'd done recently, as well as references to things from as far back as I'd known her. It was clear she'd been keeping tabs on me, both online and offline, gathering up every scrap of information she could about my life and hoarding it here, in her collection. She talked about us eating lunch together and how special our dates had been to her, as if it was anything more than acquaintances getting food after class. She talked about the time she had forcibly kissed me in the woods, but she wrote it as if it had been mutual. She quoted lyrics from my favorite song and talked about how she'd always be there for me, no matter who else came into my life. Lots of references to loving me, just the way he is. Which answered another mystery about an anonymous love letter I received earlier that year with the same wording. It got worse. There were lots of posts about my boyfriend as well. These weren't so nice. They got vicious even, talking about how he didn't deserve me. He didn't know what he had. If she were with me, she'd be jealous of anyone else who came near me. So my boyfriend not being a jealous person meant he didn't love me. It was angry and hateful. I didn't like to think about the sort of person who could write so obsessively being fixated on me. One thing that didn't make sense at first was the blog she also made plenty of references to Lily's best friend Steven. She never mentioned this person to me. Her posts talk a lot about Steven and how great a friend he was, how much fun they had together, how he looked out for her, etc. I was trying to work out whether this was an online friend when one specific post made it all click. She had posted a photo and captioned it with, "Steven sent this to me. He knew I would like it and I love it," or something like that. The problem was the photo was taken from my own page. I hadn't sent it to her. She took it from my page and then claimed this fictional best friend of hers shared it with her, because in her head, she'd split me into two people. In her messed up fantasy life, I was both the perfect best friend who was always looking out for her and her soulmate, who was bound to end up with her when I finally got over my sweet, kind boyfriend and all the other easy girls I hung out with that she made dozens of posts complaining about. Who was she complaining to? Oh yeah, Lily had an audience, by the way. She asked open questions about me and her relationship with me. Got messages back from her followers. People who took what she said at face value. Saw a bunch of random people agreeing with this stalker that my boyfriend didn't deserve me and we were bound to break up soon so I could be with Lily. The person I was clearly supposed to be with. She had this fake fanfiction version of my life, up for anyone to share their opinion on it. She'd made herself out to be the hero of it all. I went maybe a month back into this page's history. I did not look into everything else that was there. It was too much, so I'm not sure how long this had been going on. I sent Lily a message confronting her about the blog. She said nothing, and I cannot stress how weird it was to have found pages and pages dedicated to me, with her talking about how she was in love with me and would make sure we ended up together, slamming my boyfriend and building a fantasy life with two different versions of me in it that she clearly believed to be real, then acting like it hadn't happened. She said nothing, didn't address it, and just changed the subject. Even after I pushed, and it was like she hadn't even registered what I said. I've never seen anything else like this. She deleted the page, of course, or at least changed the name and hid it so I never found it again. It wasn't the end, though. I wasn't going to hang out with her anymore, but we were still shoved together in classes, and she had started to actually scare me with what she might do next. I'm kind of a paranoid person, I'll admit. Knowing someone was obsessively keeping track of me for who knows how long freaked me out. The next thing she pulled was trying to seduce my boyfriend. It was an absolutely useless attempt that only made him uncomfortable. He told me about it right away. What was her plan there? Did she hope to tell me he cheated and wait for me to break up with him? Why would I want her after that? When that didn't work out for her, she tried hitting on 3 of my other friends. None of them took the bait. She ended up dating one of my former housemates for a while, but made sure to send me messages while they were together, letting me know she'd rather be with me. Yeah, no thanks. Lily made sure to stay in my life the whole time I was at university. There was a time when I tried to pull away from her, and she ended up starting rumors about me and damaging a career opportunity I'd put a lot of work into. I don't know what else she did behind my back, but it made me realize it was safer to let her think she was a part of my life while ignoring her, rather than doing something that would cause her to get angry. After I graduated, Lily still wanted to spend time together, but I knew I didn't have to now. I made excuses about work and barely talked to her after that point. I almost entirely stopped posting on social media that I knew she knew about. Of course, she didn't give up that easily. She tried to start conversations. She asked me to meet up with her. Attempts I usually ignored. I didn't like to think she was still tracking me online, but she probably was. I don't know how, but she'd occasionally reference things that I mentioned online somewhere she shouldn't have known about. Last time we had a real conversation, she sent me a message out of nowhere. We hadn't spoken at all in months, and we hadn't talked about anything serious in much longer than that. Thinking about that conversation still makes my skin crawl, but I'll summarize what happened. At first, she asked me some questions about how long I had known I was queer. I told her some basic stuff, the kind of thing I'd tell anyone who asked. Then she changed the subject. Started talking about how I would feel about her if she were a boy. About wanting to be a boy for me. The messages quickly became weird. She went into plenty of detail about fantasies she had of the two of us. Again, we were not friends at this point. We'd never have been especially close. At least not from my perspective, and we had barely spoken for years. I can't imagine sending messages like that to even a close friend, let alone someone who barely knows you. I tried telling her to not pull this crap with me, but she decided to change tactics. She sent photos of herself, followed by a bunch of messages, maybe 4 or 5 a minute. Way too fast for me to reply to before the next one arrived. Basically quoting back what I told her about myself and my past earlier. She was telling me these things as if they had happened to her. She was role-playing as me. The worst part was that she seemed to believe it was real, that those things actually happened to her, even when she was quoting me word for word. Things I told her only hours before were now her life. It was like she was trying to absorb my history, take it over, to make my life part of her. Yeah, I didn't talk to her again after that. I ignored future attempts she made to talk to me, and I eventually silently deleted her from the inactive social media, which was her only real way of contacting me. I really thought she might finally move on. A few days ago, she sent me a friend request. It's sitting there unanswered because I know if I delete it, she'll only send another one. Lily and I met nearly 12 years ago. This story is just the highlights, and even then, it's the only stuff that I know about for sure. A lot has happened behind my back. I know it did. The fantasy life you have built for the two of us in your head is the only place you'll be seeing me anytime soon. July 20th, 2012. I remember the exact date because it was the same day as the shooting at the Batman premiere in Aurora, Colorado, which is oddly relevant. Started out pretty normal for me. I was a patient tech at a dialysis clinic in rural Alabama and was up early to open the clinic. The first thing I saw after shutting off my alarm at 2:45 a.m. was a text message from my cousin Taylor, who lives in Colorado, saying, "You're going to see news about a shooting in Colorado, but Meg and I are safe." Naturally, I flip on the TV. soaking up the horror while throwing on my scrubs and getting angry at mankind. Great start to a Friday. I pull up to my clinic and notice that the nurse that opens with me isn't there yet. No biggie because I'm a little early, so I grab my bag and head in to get started. I finish up my prep work in the water room. You have to do all sorts of testing on the water used on dialysis patients, and go out on the treatment floor. No nurse still. The clinical manager walks in about that time and says, "Where's Nurse Nancy?" To which I replied, "I have no idea, I'll call her." After trying her house and cell without getting an answer, I'm a little bit peeved. This particular nurse was picking up night shifts at the nursing home and had a bad habit oversleeping. One of my coworkers says, "Why don't you drive by her place," which was one street over from the clinic, and check if she's even there. Now before anyone says, "Why didn't she go?" let me explain something. It was almost time for the patients to come in, but a nurse has to be in the building in order to even let them in the lobby. My coworker was a nurse and could at least let everyone in while we figured out what Nurse Nancy's deal was. Anywho, I agreed to ride by because it is literally a stone's throw away, and because if I saw her car was there, I was going to lay on the horn until she woke up. I pull up to her house and she's there, so I deploy my "I'm honking mad" tactic until she pokes her head out the door, apologizing and swearing she'll be out the clinic in like 5 minutes. Cool, so I head back to the clinic, park in the still empty parking lot, and start to get out of my car. In the time it took me to open my door, stand up, and turn around, there's this guy standing outside my door blocking my way going, "Where's your bag?" I'm so confused. I thought he was a patient's spouse or son or friend initially, and I said, "It's inside, why?" I started to move forward and realized there's a knife poking me in the chest. Is this real life? We never worry about thieves or druggies because our clinic has no narcotics, and nothing to steal unless you're really into shitty Tench TVs that might or might not have gotten puked or bled on. I know only a second or two went by, but it felt like eons. I remember my ears started ringing and my dad's voice saying, "If you get cornered by someone, scream obscenities to shock them." I don't know, he was probably being sarcastic. Then hit them as hard as you can. Then run. My chest felt like it was on fire. Why me? Why today? Why'd that guy shoot up a theater? What's wrong with people? Next thing I know, I'm screaming, "Cocksucker." I slammed my right hand up under his knife while swinging a wild uppercut with my left fist. He drops the knife and immediately starts backpedaling. I'm yelling after him and he's grabbing his face while breaking into a run. I watch him dash out in the back of the lot and it hits me. The adrenaline rushes over and I'm beating on the clinic door because my hands are shaking too badly to get my key in the lock. My coworker lets me in, and right before the door shuts, I see Nurse Nancy pull up. I'm kinda yelling what happened. Ears are still ringing and my coworker is freaking out and calling 911. Then I look at my hands. My right palm is cut and the 3 knuckles on my left are split. Nurse Nancy is inside now and I'm trying to not throttle her. I know it wasn't exactly her fault, but I'm just going to blame it on the nurse. Cops show up, get the rundown, and insist on taking me to the ER because A, I might need stitches, and B, I'm not hysterical, so they think I'm in shock. I don't need sutures, just some liquid stitches. Or medical superglue. But I had to get a tetanus shot because, to quote the doc, the human mouth is a cesspit of bacteria and filth. Awesome. Very uplifting. Now for some actual uplifting information. I had given a pretty decent description of the dude, and because I'd landed a decent blow to the face, the officers thought it wouldn't be hard to find him. Guess what? They didn't even have to look. An officer was sitting in the parking lot of the clinic when he saw a guy matching the description walking through, looking under cars. The cop is not in an unmarked squad car and thinks, surely no one is that dumb, but lo and behold, when he gets closer, the guy has a busted upper lip. Apparently this guy was trying to find the knife he dropped and maybe a Darwin Award. Officer Friendly brings him in for questioning. It turns out this understanding fellow has been in and out of prison quite a bit. He admits to everything except that a 5'4", 115-pound lady got the drop on him and pleads guilty. He was given a heavy sentence because of his lengthy criminal history and, poorly attempted armed robbery. I don't remember when he's supposed to be getting out, but I'm fairly certain I'll never have to see him again. The story takes place in the summer of 2017. My name is John. I live in a rural part of Alabama, but chose to work in the city. The drive is about 45 minutes or so depending on traffic. However, by the time I pick my son up from the sitter, get dinner, and get home, I've been in the car for about 1.5 hours. My house is surrounded by trees, and the neighbors are few and far between. It can be pretty lonely living here, but I enjoy the privacy. One evening, I pulled into my driveway and noticed something odd. The doors of my storage shed were wide open. I told my son to sit in the car as I got out to investigate. I didn't see anything missing and closed the doors back. I know the wind had not blown them open because it has 2 latches you have to open in order to get it open. The next day I looked around and, much to my dismay, 2 weed eaters along with a few other garden tools were missing. I know I should have contacted the police, but I knew there wasn't much they could do at that point. Throughout the week, I had some time off and decided to tackle some yard work that I needed to get done, which included cutting down a medium-sized tree that had grown next to my house. Once I cut it down, it took everything I had to move it to the edge of my property, just inside the woods. I planned on cutting it up another day. Fast forward to the next Friday night, I left work at 7 p.m., picked up my son, and we arrived home at 8:30. As I pulled in the driveway, my son and I noticed something lying across the driveway. It looked as if a tree branch had fallen across my driveway. As I drove up to it, I thought to myself, there are no trees over my driveway. Once I looked towards the base of the tree, my heart sank to the bottom of my stomach. It was the tree I had cut down. I had put it clear on the other side of my property until I could cut it up. I recognized the marking from my chainsaw. I didn't know what to do. My son and I sat there in silence for at least 5 minutes. I rolled the driver and passenger windows down just an inch and listened to hear if anyone was out there. I heard nothing. I then realized in order for me to get to my house, I would have to move the tree. I told my son I was going to get out and move it just enough so he could get past, and I would lock the doors. If anything happens, he could use my phone to call the neighbor who lived the closest. I darted out of my car, moved the tree slightly, and raced back to the car. I was terrified. Luckily, my son was on the ready to unlock the doors for me to get back in. I drove up towards my house and we got in safely. I didn't sleep well that night, to say the least. The next day I woke up to find the tree was moved again, this time a few feet behind my car. To this day, I am still baffled at who could have done this, or what their intentions were. Next time I will be smarter and call the police. I do have another question that I can't answer. How did someone know where I put the tree after I cut it down? Whoever had done this had to have been watching me. I put the tree in the woods. That thought alone is enough to keep me up a lot.